Welcome, everyone, back to the podcast this week. We've got our guest, Kevin Conklyn, a commercial lender here from First Hope Bank. I will let him introduce himself, of course, but we're happy to have him here talk about all things commercial lending, banking, etc., and get a feel for what's going on out there. So Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it, and good morning. It took a couple weeks for us to get here, but I'm glad and happy to be on. So as you said, I'm a commercial loan officer here. I joined in November of 24, roughly, so I'm going on 2 years here. And excited to be part of the bank and to help First Hope grow and all that.
Awesome. So how did you get into commercial lending, and was this always was banking always your career path, or what? Tell us a little bit about that.
So to be honest, banking wasn't really on my radar, so to
Mhm.
speak. So when I went into college, I was an accounting major. Found that to be very dry, and then I think after a year and a half, I kind of dropped that and just switched to finance, something a little more broad.
Uh-huh.
Initially, I wanted to be a financial advisor for professional athletes and kind of mix my two loves of finance and sports together. But then that kind of fell by the wayside. And then I was just kind of looking for an internship, ended up interning at another bank, which now does not exist. And then once I got my foot in the door there, then I kind of took to an interest, started as a credit analyst there,
Uh-huh.
was there for about a year or so, and then transferred it to another department again as an analyst, and then just kind of worked my way up. Went from analyst to senior analyst to portfolio manager, and then once I started to get more interaction with customers at the portfolio management level, then that's kind of when my eyes opened to being a lender and kind of straying away from the number side of it and more of the customer contact side. So that's kind of how I got into the commercial lender role and haven't looked back since.
Very nice. So, perfect segue to my next question. Thank you. So,
Mhm.
so for our listeners who may not be familiar with what commercial lending really entails, what does a commercial lender actually do? What is some of your what does some of that look like for you?
It's kind of funny. It's actually, better phrased as, what does it not entail? Because the
Okay.
commercial lending role really is all encompassing.
Mhm.
From just kind of a higher view. Um, we help customers either refinance or refinance existing mortgages on commercial real estate or help them acquire new commercial real estate. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest day-to-day role in what we do. But there's so much more involved in terms of helping customers and businesses get lines of credit, helping them get new term loans to purchase vehicles, equipment, machinery, all of that stuff.
Cool.
But then once we have, customers on board, then we also are tasked with the portfolio management side of it. So we help manage customers with renewals of the lines of credit. We help them with any online banking issues that they have. Even though that might not be our area of expertise, we're kind of the frontline person for those people and for those customers where, if they have a question about something, whether it's, completely related to the commercial lending side or not. We're kind of the go-to point person for them. So it's kind of all encompassing. It really, depends on the day. Some days are slow, some days are very busy. And obviously that's a lot due to rate environment
Uh-huh.
as well. But so there, at any given day, you could be swamped with, a million different things, small things, big things, or you could be on the road meeting customers, going to look at properties. So, there's kind of a lot involved, which is why I like the role of, being a commercial lender.
Nice. So is there a typical day in the life of a commercial lender, or is every day a little bit different for you?
I think every day is a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
I think every year is a little bit different just because of what's going on. So during COVID, our days were slammed with doing PPP loans and COVID payment deferrals, and then the following year, interest rates were incredibly low. So then we were just bombarded with new requests and people refinancing. And then the following year, rates, went drastically higher. So then everything kind of cooled down a bit. But no, I don't think there's anything really cookie cutter about day to day stuff. It really just kind of depends on, what's coming up with, new lines of credit coming in or, renewals, and then customers, looking to purchase buildings or refinance, existing mortgages.
Wow, that's it's nice. I like a job when you don't quite know what the day is going to bring to you. So
Yeah,
it keeps things interesting.
exactly.
So tell me this, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What's your motivator when it comes to being a commercial banker?
So I think part of it is kind of what we talked about the schedule changing day to day.
Uh-huh.
I like not knowing kind of what the day's going to bring. So that's part of it. Another part of it is getting to be on the road and meeting customers and going to see different properties and kind of talking with them, whether it's their vision for bringing their new business in, or if they're building, doing construction, talking about what their vision is. That's part of it. But I think the biggest part is helping people and businesses kind of grow. I think that's exciting to do. Working with a customer that is looking to open another location, that's something that's very fulfilling, and seeing that come to fruition for them, and seeing kind of, it sounds a little cliche, but like seeing like their dreams come true
Uh-huh.
is a very unique and exciting experience from my perspective, and being able to kind of help them along the way. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is, whether, like I said, they're expanding their business or they're expanding their real estate portfolio, and, if that's their dream, kind of helping them achieve that.
That's great. So that again, perfect segue into my next question. Thank you. You're doing great with that. So I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah, which
so
is
so
funny and completely unintentional.
so tell me this. So why is relationship building so important when it comes to commercial lending and banking?
Um, so I think there's a couple different reasons. One is you get to build the trust of the customer, because when when I when I first started in banking, I think that there was sort of a negative connotation associated with banking,
Uh-huh.
in the sense that, people were afraid they were always, going to get, fees assessed, and, the bank's just trying to take their money and all that stuff. Like there's a very negative perception of it. So kind of building that trust with the customer is the biggest key. And if you can be transparent and build that relationship, so then they know that they're not getting, one over on, something, and that we actually have their best interest in mind. We're not just saying that. We're not just, you know, um, trying to put on a good face. Like that's actually our goal.
Right.
So building the relationship kind of sets that foundation with the customer to say, hey, look, if you need anything at all or have any questions, feel free to come to me. Like I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability to kind of get that for you. And if I don't know, then I can point you in the direction of someone that does. So that way, we can kind of be the one stop shop. But I think that and that especially holds true in today's world. Coming from a smaller bank that transitioned to a bigger bank and then became part of a larger bank, I saw kind of the aspect of what happens when you are put into that corporate mindset from the banking perspective, and you kind of lose that relationship, and it hurts the customer, it hurts you. You don't get that same level of conversation and dialogue and trust from their end. So coming back to kind of the the smaller local bank, it's a lot easier and helpful to kind of build those relationships. And, I know customers appreciate that too, because then, they're able to just pick up the phone and you're able to talk to someone and talk to someone, and there's that level of, comfortability there.
So so tell me, is there a typical business customer? Um, or is everyone unique? Like, what's the kind of what type of clients do you see and do you work with on a day-to-day basis?
Um, well, no, I think that's the beauty of commercial lending is there's no box that a customer, has to fit in order for us to help them. So we can, like I said, we can do anything from financing commercial real estate. I think, office has been a little bit troublesome over the last decade or so, but given the right customer and given, the right property, we would still be able to look at that at a bare minimum. And then as far as like business owners, no, there's no real, typical customer that we look at. We have everyone from financial services companies to pizzerias to florists, kind of everyone, really anyone that needs help, we'll be able to look at it. Obviously, we'll have to make sure that, the numbers work from that perspective, but we'll do whatever's in our ability to help whoever it is that needs help and is willing to, trust us to bank with us and, use us for whatever lending that they need. So that's kind of the beauty of the commercial lending, role is that there's really no one's it's kind of a, and everyone and anyone is welcome. So.
Mhm. No, that's fantastic. So, um, what are some of the so speaking of all these customers, you've got a variety of 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 people coming to you. So what are some of the common challenges that these business owners are facing when they come to you? What is it they're trying to what are some of the things they're trying to deal with and accomplish?
Um, so I think on the commercial real estate side, most of it is related to interest rate. So if they have a higher interest rate, they're looking to refinance out of it to avoid paying, X percent. So we'll do whatever we can to kind of help them get down to more of a market level interest rate. And then as far as the, typical business owner, it kind of depends. I think the most common thing is that, for, different types of contractors or, companies that have services that are billed out and their customers are on payment terms, kind of fixing that gap of payment. So if they provide, widgets for one of their customers and then, they're on repayment terms, but the direct customer of us they still have bills to pay and they have employees to
Mm,
pay and they
right.
have, utilities and all that. So kind of fixing that pay gap there, between when they collect revenue from their customers and satisfying all of their overhead. That's kind of the biggest challenge. And that's where, personally, from my perspective, the line of credit comes in. Cause then it's kind of like insurance, some customers just like to have it even though they don't need it. But when you do need it, it's good to have. And
Right.
so if you come into that sort of instance where you have that pay gap, then you're able to draw on the line and, use it to kind of cover your overhead until you get repaid from customers. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest challenge on my end from the commercial lending side. Though I will say, the online banking world has definitely changed, and so I will help be the point person for a lot of customers if they have online banking questions or if they have
Yeah.
any issues, making, multiple deposits or transfers, or getting, other people in their business, access to online banking. Kind of what I said when we started this, even though that's not my direct area of expertise,
Right.
that's a common area where I can help facilitate and point, some people in the right direction.
Wonderful. So again, these clients that are coming to you, what no, let's talk about the businesses themselves. So what are some of the um when they're coming looking for a loan, what should they be prepared for? What type of documents, number what should they be preparing to come with when looking for a loan?
Mm. So as far as tangible items go, typically what we ask for are the last 3 years of business and or personal tax returns, depending on how the company is set up. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would say. Make sure you're having constant dialogue with your accountant, depending on what time of the year it is. Obviously the first quarter they're in, very busy. So, like having those items in order definitely helps make our job easier because we're most certainly going to ask for that. Obviously, it depends on the situation. If it's, a company or a person that's looking to purchase real estate, then you're not going to have those tax returns. So then in that case, a current rent roll and projected operating expenses for the building that they're purchasing would be something that, we're looking for upfront. So those are kind of the tangibles. The intangibles, one of the questions that I like to kind of start off with whenever I'm having this conversation with customers is, what is your goal? Obviously, if they're looking to purchase real estate, then that's the goal, but there also might be a goal of, I'm looking to get the best interest rate possible. I'm looking to get the longest amortization possible on the loan. I'm looking to have no prepayment, premium, whatever the case is. But if it's for an operating company, they might say, I'm looking to, just alleviate some of the debt service that I currently have. I'm looking to, like had mentioned before, kind of cover that gap in payments from their customers and their overhead. But asking that question up front is kind of the biggest tool for us and the commercial loan officer and lender to navigate what we're trying to do to help them. So if they can answer that, fully and honestly, then it helps me figure out on my end what I need to do to kind of help them reach their goal. So, I think one of the things I like to tell people is, just prepare a whole list of questions, questions about the process from our end, questions about, what you're looking for, if anything like that is helpful from my perspective in getting us to where you want to be and to where you need to go.
So for example, what are some of the questions they should be asking?
Well, I think one of the biggest question is, where are rates now, which obviously is a kind of a loaded question because in today's day and age, they're, a little bit fluctuating and a little bit
Mhm.
volatile. But the I would say the second biggest question is, how long does the process take? Their speed is our speed. So if they need to close ASAP, then we'll do everything we can to close ASAP as well. And then, I think a lot of the questions come, about fees and, what are our fees? What are the, total closing costs going to look like? Because people need to budget and people need to, figure out exactly what they're getting themselves into. And, dollar for dollar doesn't make sense for them to do it now with where rates are and, the amortization and what the payment's going to be. And then on top of that, what closing costs are going to be. So I think a lot of the questions that I get that are I justifiably so, are about structure because a lot of people don't know. They're not sure about what a typical, commercial loan structure is, or, how a line of credit works, or what the terms of, a term loan are. I think term loans are probably a little bit more, common just because everyone has a car, and, they're very
Right.
similar to that. So, that part of it, I think, customers have a good grasp on, but, the
Okay.
structure of a mortgage and, construction financing and lines of credit, those are kind of the big ticket items to ask about.
Got it. And so probably the one big question is why First Hope Bank? What makes us different from everybody else out there? So, um, why work with us? Why work with you? Like, what's the big question?
Um, well, I think that First Hope, being that we are a smaller community bank, you have the ability to really get to know people and work with people that, you could save their cell phone number and call them at any given time. You could invite them out for, golf outings or events, if we're helpful in that area. But really, it's the ability to kinda get to know the staff and get to know the tellers, the branch managers, people in back office if, you're constantly doing, wire transfers and online banking, things like that. But from the commercial loan perspective, from my perspective, First Hope offers that ability for, as we talked about before, building relationships. And I think it's harder for people to build relationships with, the larger banks because they have such a large infrastructure and they have so many customers. It's almost impossible for them to develop those one-on-one relationships with customers and to really get to know, who they're dealing with and who they're working with. And that's really the reason why I came to First Hope, because I felt the career path that I was on was heading towards more of a larger scale corporate banking role, and that wasn't really what I was looking to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you wanted to go down that path and working with, the larger bank, but it's difficult for the big banks to really develop that personable relationship with customers. So, I think that's the biggest advantage that First Hope offers. Is really getting to know the people, and, like I said, saving their cell phone number and being able to, text Sunday morning, "Hey, I have a question about this. What are your thoughts?" And I would be happy to answer, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people here at the bank that would also feel the same way.
That's great. No, you don't have to sell me.
Yeah, yeah, I know that, Andrew.
I've got my own reasons for being here at First Hope.
Mm,
It's a great bank. I love the community bank aspect of things.
mm,
Um, so that's for me is really good. But so let me wrap up this part of the conversation a little bit. So if listeners remember one thing from today's conversation, what would you want it to be? What if a business is listening to this episode, what's one takeaway they can have about First Hope, about lending? What's the one thing they should know?
I think that would be, if you're at all curious about what other banking options are out there, definitely explore, because there are different options out there and there are different pros and cons that each bank can offer. But I think the advantages that First Hope can offer, substantially outweigh some of the other advantages that the bigger banks can offer. And I think that the relationship aspect of it, is the biggest pro, because that, rates will come up and down. They will fluctuate as time goes on. Fees are adjustable and negotiable. terms of a loan and a line, they can be negotiated, but the relationship with the person is something that is hard to find, and there's constant turnover in the big bank world. But in First Hope, there's really not that much turnover because we as employees love it here. And so as long as they'll have me, I will be here. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is, if you're at all curious, see what's out there and know that First Hope can offer, that relationship banking aspect that other banks can't.
Well said. I agree. I think, for me, I see I've worked at numerous banks, and um, I feel like First Hope really has all the capabilities
Hmm.
that that the larger nationals, nationwide banks have, but we
Hmm.
still have that personal relationship feel, and
Yeah.
like you said, being able to text or call someone's cell and ask them a question, I think really makes a big difference. It brings a lot of peace of mind, I think, to our clients, whether it be consumers or
Mhm.
businesses.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I had a customer a few months ago. He texted me on Saturday and he said, "Hey, do you have time for a quick call? I know it's Saturday." And I was in the car, so I said, "Sure." So we talked for a half hour and just kind of went over this property that he was looking at and just high level stuff and nothing, nothing crazy. It was just the fact that he was able to know that I was there to kind of lend an ear, and bounce some ideas off of, that's what we're here for. That's part of what makes us unique from, the bigger fish in the sea.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, so fantastic. Thank you so much for all that. So let me ask you this random question. Um,
Mhm.
you work with a lot of different businesses. So if you could, I know you talked about being a financial planner at one point, but if you could run any type of business for a day, what would it be?
Hmm,
Ooh.
that's a good question. Um, I think that I would run a landscaping business.
Mhm. Okay.
And I think that's just speaking personally because I love being outside. And
Nice.
there's something so uh peaceful about mowing a lawn. And I didn't realize that
Right?
until I became a homeowner. And obviously, I mean, if you're mowing 15 lawns a day, then I think it would get a little bit tedious, and those folks probably
Sure.
have a different perspective than I do. But I think from just a personal aspect, I think that's probably what I would do. Just because I like being outdoors and I like dealing with gardens and flowers and all that stuff. So
Yeah, being
yeah.
outside is great. It's
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what kind of business I would run for a day. Probably it's interesting, being in marketing, I don't get to
Mhm.
see kind of the customers face to face day to day, that a lot of other people in the bank do. So I would probably that's probably whatever role I chose, it would be something where I could interact with the customers directly, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll work at Starbucks for a day and just make coffee for everyone. Um,
Hey, why not? Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Absolutely.
I think the if I had to pick something else, it would be something like including food, just because I love food, and I love to eat. So, something to that aspect, would also be a fun role. Although, again, I'm sure if you're surrounded by food all day, you're probably sick of it. So you may not have
True,
this
fair.
the same
That's
urge
very
to
fair.
pick at stuff all day.
That's great, and we're getting close to lunchtime here, so
Yep.
now I'm getting really hungry. Um, but anyway, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Great conversation. It's weird. I know I work for the bank, but I have nothing but good things to say about this place.
Mhm.
So So hopefully our listeners got that same feel from today's conversation. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. Everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for taking part in this episode. Again, make sure you follow our podcast, Real Conversations About Money, um, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I think we're on YouTube as well. All those various channels, so you can find us out there. And we'll talk to you next time. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. Anytime you need me on, just let me know.
Thanks so much.